gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport? It is Izubee, Charles, and good morning to you all. It is October 13th, 2023, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us on Good Morning CaneSport. Today, I'm joined by Matt Shodell as we break down the news of the day on this beautiful Friday the 13th. First up in your Miami Hurricanes news, be sure to check out the You Bet CaneSport show with Lee Sterving and Mr. Gary Furman, who is not with us this morning, as they break down the North Carolina odds and a look at other top games this weekend. Speaking of North Carolina, tomorrow is the big day. The Hurricanes head up to Chapel Hill to face off against the number 12th ranked North Carolina Tar Heels, currently unbeaten. Just came off a big victory against Syracuse. Mr. Shodell, how are we feeling headed to this game following what we saw last weekend?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the Izubee Charles show. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Look, I predicted a blowout win against Georgia Tech. I predicted a win over Texas A&M. So I guess in terms of predictions, I'm 1-1. I do think. Well, I said yesterday Miami has, in my opinion, a 45% chance of winning. I assume you expect Miami to win, Izubee, right? You always are the optimist. So
I'm actually the opposite. I picked Miami to lose this game, and
what?
That was earlier this season. But right now, I'm tossing in the air. I don't know right now. I got to give it a couple more hours, and maybe my noon today, late afternoon, Friday, I'll have my decision. But right now, I'm optimistic. I don't know where to go right now.
Right, because in the preseason, you're talking about when we all had to pick the season record, and it would have seemed weird for you to say they're going to be 12-0, right? So you had to pick somebody that they lost to, but now that the game's here, you're like, yeah, they're going to win. So I get it. And listen, they can win. I don't know I know what your keys to the game are because I read your story, but other people don't know what your keys to the game are because we haven't run the story yet. But for me, if you have to pick one key to the game, it's not Tyler Van Dyke getting back on point. It's stopping Drake May, to me, because I'm not that concerned about Tyler. I'm not that concerned about the Miami offense. I am concerned, and I remain concerned about the Miami defense. I know they performed well, but I'm still not 100% sold on the cornerbacks because both Takori Couch and Jaden Davis have been giving up over 60% completions against when they're targeted, and they've been great in run support. Takori has 3 interceptions, which is among the best in the country, and Jaden Davis has been amazing in run support and just being physical at the point of attack. But when they're attacked downfield in the passing game, they've had some issues. That's just a fact. So if I'm picking one key, they've got to pressure Drake May. They cannot let him just be comfortable back there. They can't let him escape the pocket. It's a very, very tall task, but that's Matt Shodell's key to the game. Izubee Charles's key to the game. I don't know. You had 5. You have 5 of them we're going to run at some point, right? But what's your number one key to the game?
I think my number one key to the game was the opposite of what you said. I think we need to get Tyler Van Dyke back on track. And obviously, those 3 interceptions last game versus Georgia Tech, that was huge in the way that game played out. And I kind of found something that was interesting last year when they lost to Middle Tennessee State. He had the 2 interceptions, the pick 6, and then the following week was against North Carolina again. He comes out, throws for 496 and 3 touchdowns. So I'm being an optimist. Hopefully, my fingers are crossed. We see a repeat of history, but Miami wins that game. I feel like Tyler Van Dyke, needs to bounce back and will bounce back in a big way against UNC. And I feel like if he plays a really, really good game, Miami's going to have a really, really good chance of coming out of Chapel Hill with that victory. They've lost to UNC the last 4 times, 3 of those 4 times by 3 points, really, really close games. So it's been a tight series over the past 4 years. Obviously, North Carolina coming away with the win in most of those games. But I think, while Drake May, might be that guy, one of the top prospects, in this class coming up, I feel like Tyler Van Dyke has to come in and win that big game. I'm not sure, in 2020 or 2021, whether he won a big road game, but as long as I've been covering the Hurricanes, he hasn't, gone on the road and had that statement victory. So I feel like if there's a time where that needs to happen, hopefully it happens Saturday, against North Carolina. And I feel like, we talked about it a little bit, that defense, there's no, one area where it's like, okay, Miami can just pound these guys on the ground, or just take advantage of their corners. It's just a solid defense all around. So, I feel like Shannon Dawson has to dig in that bag of tricks. Hopefully they don't run the ball 1,000 times down the middle like we saw against Georgia Tech, and come up with a couple more creative things, a couple things. Against Texas A&M, we saw them really air out the ball, and all the other games we really saw them air out the ball and kind of put up points. And we didn't really see that against Georgia Tech. So I feel like my biggest key was just whether Tyler Van Dyke can come out and show, hey, last game was kind of a fluke. This is who I am, the first 4 games of the season and things like that. But a lot of big, things leading up to this game. And, obviously we saw the emotions of the players. We saw the Matt Lee situation where he was, cursing and doing all that stuff on the sidelines. Just as a team, Matt, just how do you think Miami is going to respond to this? Do you think they're going to come out, hot? Do you think they're going to come out slow? Just how do you think they come out, in that first quarter, in that first half against UNC?
Well, they better come out on fire and mad and angry and playing really hard, giving tremendous effort. But it's funny, Matt Lee he's a unique guy. And I'm trying to remember who the other player was who did this all the time. But few and far between, there are players who will use the curse word for basically for what, I don't know if I can say curse words on the air, probably not. But what you make number 2. When you go to the bathroom, you go number 2. He uses that word, and it's not poop, like an adjective. He intersperses it into his sentences, and it's great. We do Zoom calls now on Tuesdays and Wednesdays with the players for our interviews, and I mean, I just couldn't help but laugh. Every time he's saying the word, it's just it's just part of his vocabulary. Like it's like just a regular adjective to him. He doesn't, he just thinks it's a regular word, and for whatever reason, that strikes me as very funny. There was one other player who did that in the past, but I can't remember who it was. I don't want to say the wrong player. But he is a guy who wears his heart in his sleeve. And if every Miami Hurricane had the same attitude he does, and some people compare him to Casey Jones, he's not as mean as Casey Jones. He's a little bit nicer than Casey Jones, okay? Casey Jones literally would try to injure guys in the piles, literally, that's for real. He would bite guys when they're in the pile back in those days. So Matt Lee's a little nicer, but Matt Lee will do whatever it takes to win. And you could see the pain on his face. And to be honest, I enjoyed seeing the pain on his face because you know what? You haven't been here as long as I have, Izubee, but they have lost so many games in the last 20 years where the players just didn't seem to really care that much afterwards. You couldn't really see the visceral, and believe me, they were upset, but you couldn't see that visceral, am I saying that right? Visceral emotion. And, Matt Lee went viral for his emotion after that game. How that showed how bad he wants to win. If every player in Miami's team wants to win as bad as he does over the next few years, Miami will not be losing very many games because football is a very mental game. A lot of it is just who's going to give up first. Who can't take the pain for that long. It's like listening to me on this morning podcast. Somebody was complaining yesterday saying, why is he trying to be funny? He's annoying. Like you have to, as a listener to this podcast, you have to fight through the pain, get to when Izubee talks, get to when, well, not Gary, but get to when Stephen Wagner talks. It's just an innate thing. You can't teach it. And this is what Mario Cristobal wants. When he talks about who he's recruiting, the type of player he's recruiting, he's not just talking about great players. He's talking about guys with the killer mentality where you will do whatever it takes to win. You will push yourself to the limit. You will stop talking to your friends and family for 3 to 4 months out of the year because you need to be in the film room. You need to be focused on only football and academics, and that's it. So to me, it was refreshing to see a guy that upset. I haven't seen a Miami football player that upset, probably dating back to when Miami lost in the Fiesta Bowl, quite honestly. I really don't remember seeing somebody that upset after a loss. And that's something that should actually, it sounds weird, but should hearten Miami fans moving forward because it means Mario and these players are on the same page in terms of it means a lot to them. It doesn't mean, okay, I'll go home and now game's over. I'll go party with my friends and we'll go back to practice on Monday or Tuesday. Monday's an off day. On Tuesday. It means, this is life. Football is life. I live to play football. It's not just a job. It's what I am. It's my DNA. And that's what Mario Cristobal wants in his players.
Yeah, no, I'm really, really hoping to see Miami come out, just all up that energy from the Georgia Tech game and just kind of, give the frustration out on UNC. I know Matt Lee kind of, went viral for that moment. We saw Nez Cooper kind of slamming his helmet down in frustration after the game and things like that. So obviously you never want to see a loss, but how players react is another thing too. And I feel like, as weird as it might sound, they reacted in a good way and how bad it was, but showing emotions and not, kind of being lethargic with all that stuff. So a ton of things to look forward to with that game tomorrow. 7:30 p.m. kickoff, I believe, or 7:30, 8 o'clock. Yep.
No, 7:30. 7th. Don't show up at 8 o'clock, Izubee.
7:30. They got the whiteout uniforms instead of the Miami Unites, so hopefully that changes something a little bit, because if I'm Miami, I'm burning those Miami Unites jerseys and never taking them out the closet again. Because
by the way, I think it was an ESPN guy. Somebody was saying that it really hurt Miami on that fumble replay of Chaney where they couldn't clearly see the ball. They were saying that because of the black dark jerseys, that they couldn't really tell if the ball was moving because it was sort of melded into the background of the jersey. Whereas if it was a whiteout jersey, whatever, they could have more clearly seen the ball was not moving. That's what somebody said. But yeah, I never want to see those uniforms ever again. I mean, it just seems like whenever Miami comes up with these crazy uniforms, nothing ever goes right. I mean, it's super annoying. I don't know why that is. I mean, I remember they tried some weird like aqua uniform a couple of years ago where it was made out of a special like recycled material. If I remember correctly, that game went terribly. They try to do some weird stuff with their uniforms. Just wear your normal uniforms. I don't even want, no whiteout uniforms, no Miami Knights uniform. Just wear orange, wear, white, like white and orange, green and whatever, like normal uniforms. Just let's forget the uniforms. I don't know why fans are so fixated. What uniforms are they wearing this week? Because every time the uniform seems to be this amazing uniform, it is a terrible result. Like, I'm done with the uniforms. I don't know why fans are so obsessed with the uniforms. I am no longer interested in uniforms whatsoever.
And the look good, feel good is kind of play good thing. I feel like that's out of the window now. Just, put your head down, get to work, and play some football. So, like I said, a big game. Miami looking for their second top 25 victory this season, and a lot of things to look forward to. And kind of sticking on the North Carolina topic without giving away too much. Matt, you need to break down position by position. Miami versus UNC. Just last kind of thing we'll talk about UNC before we move into recruiting. After kind of looking at position by position, overall, just who are you giving that edge to, as a team and as a whole, Miami or UNC?
Yeah, so for big games, I look at each position, not Miami's quarterback against the North Carolina secondary, who has the edge. I look at each position group for each team, and then I assign who has the edge. So it's Tyler Van Dyke versus Drake May. I don't need to tell you guys who has the edge there, okay? But, and I'm not a homer. I mean, you guys out there know I'm not a homer whatsoever. I mean, I just try to sort of, put on my neutral cap and like go about my business, which is why everyone hates me. But in this particular case, I added it up when I was done, and I had no idea whether Miami had the edge in most of the categories, quarterback, running back, receivers / tight ends, offensive line, the whole thing, defensive line, et cetera. All the position groups are listed this morning with an analysis and then who has the edge. And as you add it up, even though I'm predicting Miami to only have a 45% chance of winning, as you add it up, Miami has the overall edge. Like, as you add up all the position groups, they have more advantage position head-to-head than North Carolina does by 2. So on paper, I guess Miami is a better team. And you know what? They should be a better team than North Carolina on paper because Miami is a better program than North Carolina. But the matchups I don't love the Drake May versus Miami secondary matchup. Honestly, if Miami's cornerbacks were performing at a little bit higher level in terms of stopping the pass, I would predict Miami to win this game. But that's my major area of concern, and that's an area where North Carolina has a clear edge is a quarterback. And their receivers / tight ends also, I should add. North Carolina has 3 tight ends, believe it or not, that are all receiving tight ends and all can make plays, and they line up 2 at a time. Miami's going to have its hands full just trying to stop the receivers, the wide receivers, the tight ends. I mean, it's a handful, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, a lot of position battles to keep your eyes out come Saturday, but hopefully Lance Guidry and those guys can come prepared and put up a fight in UNC, not get embarrassed, and just put on a show after what we saw against Georgia Tech. We're leaving that in the past, but kind of moving forward with this morning's Good Morning CaneSport. We have a ton of recruiting on the site for you, and we're starting off with scouting reports on two of Miami's commits, Chance Robinson and O.J. Frederick out of St. Thomas Aquinas. Chance Robinson is the 4-star wide receiver, as we all know, and O.J. Frederick is kind of, under the radar 3-star defensive back that Miami flipped from West Virginia earlier this cycle. So make sure to check out the scouting report on those two Canes commits. Also on the site this morning, we have a update with 2024 linebacker out of Largo, Florida, Adarius Hayes, who's currently committed to the University of Florida. He made a visit to Miami this past weekend for the Georgia Tech matchup after previously saying his recruitment was 100% shut down. He was fully committed to the Gators, and then we magically see him pop up at the UM versus Georgia Tech game. Obviously, things didn't go Miami's way that matchup, but Adarius did like what he saw from the Hurricanes. Miami's continuing to push for his recruitment, his commitment, despite his pledge to the Gators. So a ton of information on that visit there with that.
And by the way, Izubee, Chance Robinson is putting up Izubee Charles like numbers. I mean, for people who haven't been following, he's played 6 games. He has 25 catches, I think 330 yards and 7 touchdowns, right? So, I mean, some of these Miami commits are just lighting it up. And Steven and Izubee, by the way, thank God they've taken over recruiting for Matt Shodell because it's a lot. I mean, you guys are doing a great job covering it. But what I will say is, these guys who are committed elsewhere and visit Miami, they can say whatever they want. That's the thing. I mean, and now, Izubee, from doing all these interviews that you do, what a recruit says publicly versus what he'll tell you privately, text you privately, or not even tell you at all, but you maybe hear from his people or his coaches. When a recruit is telling the Florida coaches, "Hey, I'm visiting Miami," which he did tell them before he came down here. They're not like, "Oh, great, that's wonderful." They try to talk him out of it, and he still came down. That says something. And we've seen stranger things. Now, of course, it's not great when Miami loses, okay? But in this NIL era, it's not as big a deal. Like, there's not as big a problem caused when you lose a game like Georgia Tech in front of a ton of recruits, because they had made that a huge recruiting game. They assumed they were going to have a great showing and a great win at night. It didn't happen. But for fans who are basically saying, "Oh, we're going to lose everybody now," that's not the way it works anymore. It's a whole different system than what you guys were used to 5 years ago, even, where recruits would abandon ship when things looked like they weren't going right, and people were mad, and this and that, whatever. Nowadays people have these recruits have representatives, lawyers who basically know, through backhand channels, what the NIL situation is through collectives and various other sources for their client, right? These recruits are allowed to hire lawyers, believe it or not. They can't hire them as agents, but a lawyer is an agent is a lawyer. So really they're agents, but you can't just call them an agent anymore. It's stupidity. It's NCAA rules, whatever. But that's why, commitments aren't going to be fleeing. Even if Miami winds up with 6 wins, 7 wins this year, you're not going to see this mass exodus from the class, because things are already locked into place where another program would really have to up the ante, so to speak. And you know what? Miami is doing fine with its collective. It's doing fine in terms of really the overall NIL system that they have. Now, could it be better? Yes. Long term, are there concerns when you don't have a fan base that's as big as other programs, because fans are donating the money, right? Yes, that's a concern, but you have some big money donors at Miami who have really been stepping up and helping out in the void caused by the Life Wallet meltdown. And so things aren't bad. Things are good. Recruiting is going fine. And really the biggest problem Mario's going to have, it's not going to be losing recruits. It's going to be which recruits he's going to add, and then how you fit them all on a roster that's barely losing anybody, and which players you have to say goodbye to next year, because Mario clearly upgraded the roster from last year, doing the exact same thing that he's trying to do for this next cycle. He added guys in the portal to replace players that he felt, or positions that he felt needed more competition. I'm not a big fan of that unless they're free agents. And you can see, not even half of them really have made a big impact this year, but the ones that have made an impact has been a nice impact, right? And then you have the recruiting class, which is outstanding. So if you keep stacking the recruiting classes, you're going to have to take less transfer portal guys every year, and you're going to have less turnover where you have to say goodbye to guys. Because, I told Gary the other day, Izubee, and you can look at the numbers, but they're going to be saying goodbye to players that I think they're not going to have a choice. They're going to be redshirt freshmen, second-year guys, and certainly third-year guys that will be told, sorry, we just don't have space for you, because they're going to take a lot of recruits in this year's class. It's unlimited numbers in recruits and transfers this year again. So, that's going to be a really, really interesting storyline after the season ends. But Izubee, I did want to ask you a question. I asked Gary this yesterday. I don't know if you watched the show. I hope you didn't because it's a waste of time. But I asked Gary this. I'm going to ask you. If you're Mario Cristobal and you're giving your pregame speech in the locker room, okay, before the North Carolina game, what would your overriding message be to the team after a really bad Georgia Tech loss that they have to get over, and now you really, really need to beat North Carolina because you lose 2 in a row? Honestly, ACC is probably out the window if you lose. Trying to be a top 2 team in the ACC is probably out the window if you lose to North Carolina and are 0-2 to start the year in the conference. And really your goals are pretty much going out the window and things can go off the rails there. So very important game. And what would your message be? You're in Mario Cristobal's head. What are you saying to the team?
All right, let me put on my head coaching hat real quick. That's a tough one. Hold on, let me tighten it up a little bit again real quick.
You want me to tell you what Gary said?
Yeah, well, let's see what Mr. Furman said first.
Well, so when I asked Gary that, I actually had in mind a certain answer, and he didn't say it initially, but he eventually got around to it. And my only message to the entire team was going to be, you better play well so I can take a knee at the end of the game. That's what I was going to say. So you can't use that anymore. So pick something else. And hopefully now, for the 2 minutes I've been rambling about nothing, you've thought of a message for your Miami Hurricanes football team.
All right. So my message would be the simple one. Let's just go 1-0 tonight. Forget about the past. Forget about the future. Forget about everything else. Block out all the noise. Block out Feinbaum saying all that stuff. Block out what everyone said. Block out all this stuff on social media. Just come in. This is a team that we've been, this close to beating the past few years. Let's get over the hump. Let's become 1-0. Let's get our first ACC win, and let's quiet down this crowd and then start screaming at the end and run out. That would be my message to get the guys going to go upset UNC. They're not favorites, so they're underdogs right now. So to go upset UNC and get that second top 25 win of the year. Let's right the ship. Let's get this boat back on track, and let's go pound these guys. Let's go punch them in the mouth.
Yeah. See, this is why neither of us are head coaches. Honestly, if I was going to give the answer that you just gave, I would have done the opposite. Instead of saying, don't worry about what everyone else is saying, I would literally read off everything that everybody said about Mario, about this team, about the failures of Miami's past, about this program's going nowhere. I would just read the quotes to the team. There's nothing better to prepare a team for a game than to hear how terrible everyone thinks you are, right? I mean, that's why I'm here. Everyone says how terrible I am on this show. That's why I'm here killing it today, because I want to prove everybody wrong.
Pouring more gasoline on the fire, just make it go worse and worse. Like Steven used to say, what is it, tire fire or fire tire?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. What did he say? Yeah.
Was it
No, he said because a tire fire is a real thing. What he said was something not even real. I don't know what he said.
It was something funny, but obviously that's why Mario gets paid those big bucks to say these funny or not funny, serious pre-game, whatever you want to call it, speeches and everything. I remember my coach in high school kind of used to tell us we sucked before games, which is funny, but we actually
there you go. I love that.
We didn't love that because we went. It wasn't the best season our last season was.
Well, if you actually do suck, it doesn't work. Yeah, if you actually do suck and it tells you to suck, that doesn't work. But if you're good and he tells you how bad you are, then you feel like, you've accomplished something.
Yeah, and I wish we could get Mario mic'd up and kind of have be a fly and all in that locker room before the game to see what he says. But I do think, like I said a little bit earlier, I do think they come out with kind of a chip on their shoulder with, hey, what happened last week is god-awful. Let's kind of clean our name and get back on track. So it's going to be really interesting and to see. And kind of, you mentioned this a little bit when talking about Darius Hayes. A lot of people were saying it's over. People are going to jump ship. All the recruits are going to decommit after this game. I was just like, that's not the case, whatsoever at all. Obviously, this isn't a good look when you have, the number one player in the country, Jeremiah Smith, and a bunch of other top guys in the crowd. You never want to lose in front of guys that you brought out to impress. You never, want to have a bad showing. But talking to most of these guys after the game, they said, hey, listen, obviously it's not a good loss, but if you look at last year, where was Miami at heading into Game 5? They were, 2-3 or 2-2 or whatever. They just, got upset by Middle Tennessee. They just lost to UNC. Like last year, this team was in a way worse situation. You see the progression. You You see Mario Cristobal getting the guys that he wants in to do what he needs to do for the team and all that good stuff. So I feel like I feel like there wasn't any fallout after the Georgia Tech loss. Like, obviously, you don't want to lose a game, but the repercussions or whatever happened to the game, it isn't a big thing. Just come out, beat UNC, get these kids' attention again, and then you got another big recruit weekend with Clemson coming up. So there'll be a lot of stuff, on the recruiting front, I think, happening these next 2 weeks. But like I said, Coach Izubee, let's be 1-0 and let's prove these guys wrong. But it's going to be real interesting to see.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, if I had to name a defensive player of the game and before the game, I think they're going to use James Williams a lot differently in this game than they have every game we've seen this year. I think it's time to unleash James Williams. He's shown that he understands what's going on, finally. He's shown that he can play within a system, finally. He's shown he can keep his head on straight, finally. Now it's time to let him loose, blitzing, dropping, in one-on-one coverage with guys, like doing it all, because he's a guy who can impact a game, I think, more than Cam Kinchens, more than anybody else in this defense. So I'm really actually excited. I hope that Lance Guidry is coming up with some innovative ways to put him in spots where North Carolina doesn't think he will be, because he has it all. He's got the strength for pound for pound strength. He's got quickness, speed, length, fast. I mean, there's nothing. He's got first round NFL talent written all over him, high end first round NFL talent written all over him, and this is the kind of game, based on what I've seen so far, where if he just keeps playing that way and maybe gets in a little different position where he's able to do a little bit more than he's been doing in terms of disrupting games, I think he can have just a monster game. And on offense, my player of the game, pregame, take a guess, Izubee. Who's my offensive player of the year pregame?
Tyler Van Dyke.
No.
Oh.
No. And it's not Emory Williams either. Spoiler alert. It's Colby Young. I guess you have to have Tyler Van Dyke do something, but yeah. Colby Young's size is going to present a problem for North Carolina's cornerbacks. North Carolina's cornerbacks are not the most physical bunch. They're going to have a plan, I think, to stop Xavier Restrepo. I think that's going to be their number one concern on defense. And I think that Shannon Dawson is smart enough to know that North Carolina is going to be game planning to try and really shut down the short middle of the field passing game to Xavier. And I think that's going to open up some really nice deep shots for Colby Young. So, maybe I could do a Stephen Wagner, predicting the Georgia Tech loss 10 months earlier. Wow. And after the game, I'll be like, I told you Colby Young was going to have 3 touchdowns and 180 yards. I told you James Williams was going to have a touchdown return on an interception and have 2 sacks. I'm going to do my Wags impersonation. I told everybody that they were going to lose to Georgia Tech, and look what happened. I was right. I knew they were going to have a fumble. That wasn't a fumble, but it would be ruled a fumble. I knew the defense was going to give up a 30-yard catch and a 44-yard touchdown after that, and I was right the whole time. I predicted Georgia Tech would beat Miami 3 months ago, and I was right.
During the game, I was sitting next to Steven the whole time. He's like shaking his head. I'm like, Steven, the game isn't over yet. Just please let it play out. And then it's crazy how it all unfolded too, because obviously, I think the last play that I saw was when they got the first down on that drive. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to head down and get to the press conference, all get stuff. As I'm heading out the press box and, by the outside areas, all I hear is just screams and shrieks. Yeah. I'm like, these are good screams and shrieks. I checked
the media missed it. All the media missed the end of the game because we had to go down to the press conference.
It was the craziest sequence I've ever seen. I go back into the stadium. I think so. The last thing I see is Miami getting a first down with under 2 minutes. And the next thing I see is Georgia Tech kicking an extra point. So that whole in between for me was just the craziest thing. But, it's over at UNC time, and Miami's going to bounce back. I'm calling it.
So fans don't understand what you're talking about. So here's what happens. We're on the 3rd, 4th, or 5th floor. I don't know. So we're somewhere up there in the press box. The only way to get down to the press conferences is to take the same elevator that the coaches use on the other team to get downstairs. So with 3 to 5 minutes left in the game, they encourage the media to stop watching the game from the press box and to get into the elevator so you're not going to miss the press conference. So a lot of the media winds up missing the end of the game. I actually stay in the press box, and Gary and Izubee, Izubee, you do recruiting afterwards with Stephen, but Gary goes down and misses the end of the game. I watch the end of the game because I'm writing the game story and the grading the Canes. I can't miss the end. So I can't get to the press conferences. But you have a choice to make in a game like this. You have to say, I'm going to the press conference, or I'm going to watch the end of the game from the press box. There's no other 2 ways. They used to let us go on the field for the final 3 minutes of the game. So commercial break, right? You get in the elevator, you get on the field for the final 2 minutes of the game, and you're on the field watching the end of the game, and then you go into the press conference. They do not let non-photographers, non-video people, us lowly writers are not allowed on the field anymore. You can't see the game unless, like Izubee does, you go out in the stands like a regular fan, which is horrible. I mean, who wants to go like a regular fan? That's disgusting. Sitting in those seats with those terrible views, no food, no drinks. How do people do that? How do you survive at a game for 3.5 hours without food being served to you and a drink counter and a bin full of Diet Coke? I don't understand how people do it. We get cookies up in the press box. We get pulled pork sandwiches that only cause diarrhea once every 4 times. We used to get hot dogs, which apparently killed 3 people, so they stopped serving those. That was before your time. Those were disgusting. What else do we get up there? We get like some sort of weird potato wedge things that I think were left over from like the week earlier from Wendy's and were donated to the press people. So it's great up there, But yeah, so that's what Izubee was talking about, that he wasn't able to watch the end of the game, which a lot of, as crazy as it sounds, everybody who was at the game, covering the game, missed a lot of the craziness because they were already down in the press box watching on their phones or watching on their iPads by that point, hopefully, but or not watching at all.
Yeah, very, very interesting kind of ending there. But like I said in the past, and kind of to wrap up today's show, we're going to pull a Stephen Wagner and give our 6 month ahead or 1 day ahead prediction to the game tomorrow. I'm going to start off first. At the beginning of the show, I didn't know where I was going, where I was leaning. I came to the conclusion Miami's going to win this game by 3 points against North Carolina. I'm going to say 28-31 Miami. Andy Borregales is the hero. He's going to be toted off the field on the shoulders of the team. Everyone's going to be screaming Andy, and Miami comes out with a win. But in all seriousness, I do have Miami coming away, bouncing back. Tyler Van Dyke has a big game. He kind of, silenced the haters. The defense, obviously, they can't stop Drake May completely, but they do enough to come away with the win. Matt, I'm going to pass it to you. What is your prediction? If you can toss in the score there as well to wrap up this morning's Good Morning CaneSport.
I mean, I hate ever publicly picking against Miami because people get so annoyed with me and they're like, you're a hater, whatever. But I just, again, I think they have a 45% chance of winning. It doesn't mean they're going to lose. But if I had to literally bet my house, my house on it, I would say North Carolina 38-35. That's just how I feel. I did pick Texas A&M. I picked Miami to beat Texas A&M, okay? Texas A&M was favored. I still picked Miami in that game, so don't hate me totally, okay? It's just going to be it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. I just, my hope for Miami with my Miami hat on. My Miami doesn't sound right. But anyway, with my Miami hat on is, I just want them to look good. I don't want them to look like they did against Georgia Tech because that was disheartening. To me, this whole season isn't about wins and losses. I've already said it before. I don't think this is a championship roster this year. I think next year, 10 wins, the year after playoffs. So my hope for this team is to show progress. And when you have a step back in game 5, like you saw against Georgia Tech, yeah, the defense still looked great until the very end. But it was a step backwards. There's no doubt about it. The team did not look better against Georgia Tech than it did the prior 4 games. You could blame the bye week. You could blame a bad play, a bad game plan by Shannon Dawson, Mario Cristobal, whatever. But whatever you want to say, you can have bad game plans. If your team's better than the other team, you can still run the ball successfully. You can still hit plays here and there. You're still going to win the game against the Georgia Tech team, and they didn't. Regardless of bad calls, regardless of this, it should never have been even close. Georgia Tech is not a good team. Georgia Tech's actually a terrible team. So that was disheartening. So what you want against North Carolina, even if they lose, what I would encourage Miami fans to do is if Miami plays well and loses, to say, you know what? That's okay. That's okay. Think where this program's come from for 20 years. North Carolina's ranked number 12 in the country. They have a top 5 or top 10 NFL pick at quarterback. They have other NFL talent on their team. You just want to see a well-played game by Miami. If the other team happens to win, not the end of the world to me. Not the end of the world to me. But if Miami plays badly, if Miami plays poorly and makes mistakes, and right now they're one of the worst penalized teams in the country. If they're having a lot of penalties on the road, just dumb things where it looks like they're not well coached, that would be disturbing. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt, is the old expression. And, hope for the best, expect the worst. And if you expect the worst, you can only be pleasantly surprised, right, Izubee?
And you couldn't have said it any better, man. You could not have said it any better. Well, that is all that we have for this episode of Morning CaneSport. From Matt Shodell, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.